International Media TV. Television that listens to you.
Hi, I'm Johnnie Burrell. Welcome to the program.
Professor, author, filmmaker, Dr. Jamie Walker. Welcome and thanks for the interview.
Thank you, Johnnie, for having me on your show. I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're here in San Francisco for the San Francisco Black Film Festival, and you did a film on Oscar Micheaux.
Oscar Micheaux is considered to be the first major African-American director to write and direct and produce a feature-length film. He is considered to be the father of independent African-American cinema because he laid the blueprint for many African-American directors as early as 1918. I went to the Sundance Film Festival in 2013 where I pitched a feature film idea about Oscar Micheaux, who was not only one of the first African-American directors to produce a feature-length film, but who was one of the only African-American independent directors to successfully transition to talkies at a time when many independents were being forced out of the business because major studios were buying up theaters in the South. And so the biopic celebrates his life. In addition, there is a short film that I wrote, edited, and directed. It's called The Young Oscar Micheaux, and it's a short film that will be screening at the San Francisco Black Film Festival on June 15th at the Jazz Heritage Center in San Francisco, California, in advance of the biopic on Oscar Micheaux.
We're going to show a trailer of that film in a few minutes. We're also going to talk about your first feature script, The Postwoman. It too earned honors at the Sundance Read My Screenplay contest, and your 3 books, 100 Ways Black Women Can Learn to Love Themselves, Sonia on My Mind, and Signifying Me. So you're not only a filmmaker, book author, and Mr. Micheaux, he was also an author.
He was, yeah. Oscar Micheaux actually started out writing autobiographies. He was the son of former slaves, and he was born in Metropolis, Illinois. Both of his parents decided to relocate his family to Great Bend, Kansas, because lynching was still very much pronounced in the South, and of course African-American families were still being terrorized by the Ku Klux Klan. And so like many African-American families who migrated north during the Great Migration, seeking better opportunities, seeking an escape from legalized segregation, Micheaux's family relocated to Great Bend, Kansas, where Oscar grew up on a farm. His father, his uncle, was a very wealthy homesteader. Oscar decided to relocate to Chicago in 1910 to be with his brother, who was a busboy in Chicago, because he got tired of living on the farm, and decided to try his hand at writing. He worked a lot of odd jobs in Chicago, first as a shoe shinesman and later as a Pullman porter. He started freelancing for the Chicago Defender, and realized that he wanted to move to a homestead to start producing.
You're president of and CEO of JD Publishing Group, which is a media arts project that produces films, books, and arts-based projects for women of color. Before you tell us about your education, you were graduated cum laude with distinction at most of the colleges you went to, attended, and earned your degrees. And you also remained on the dean's list every semester in college at Merit and UC Berkeley. Tell us about your education. What prompted you to study these disciplines with regard to filmmaking, author, and your interest and your passion for women.
Yeah, thank
The
you.
rights of women, things that women should know and feel about themselves. Talk to us about that. Tell us about your education.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I think that knowledge plays an important role in empowerment and in self-esteem. I'm a Bay Area resident. I was raised in Oakland, California. I attended Oakland Public Schools. I was a gifted and part of the Gifted and Honors program. I went to San Francisco State University, where I was blessed to study with the faculty in the Black Studies Department. There, I also studied in the Theater Arts Department at San Francisco State University, where I had the opportunity to work behind the scenes on a number of plays and independent film projects. I worked in front of the camera for some time. And then I was offered a full ride to Howard University, where I received both my master's and PhD in African American and Caribbean literature. I started self-publishing very early during my undergraduate years. I started freelancing for the New York Amsterdam News, the San Francisco Bayview, and many, black newspapers as a journalist. And I realized that I wanted to study screenwriting. And so I took up screenwriting as a profession, largely because it was far more easier than writing a novel. And for me, screenwriting just came a lot easier than writing like a 500-page novel. And plus, I think I have a affinity for dialogue and for telling stories. And more importantly, I really wanted to help portray positive images of blackness on the screen and to introduce to the world more African American icons and heroes and heroines who have made significant contributions to the world.
We're going to take a look at that trailer from your film, and afterwards, tell us what we're looking at.
Hey, Oscar, you ever been on a train before?
No. Want to, though.
Me too.
One day I'll be on a train.
Where are you gonna go?
Anywhere but here.
Are you all right?
Yeah.
Tell us about the film now. Tell us what we saw. And toward the end, there was a lynching. What was the significance of that in your film?
Sure. Well, Oscar Micheaux produced his second feature-length film, Within Our Gates, in 1919. 1919, as you know, was the year of Red Summer. That is the year when numerous race riots had erupted in the United States. Due to
Oklahoma, for one, right?
Oklahoma, Tulsa. Actually, Tulsa happened in 1921, the bombing of Black Wall Street. But in 1919, several American soldiers had returned home from the war, and they were seeking jobs that had now been occupied by African American men. And unable to find work, many race riots erupted in American cities and urban centers throughout the United States. And so Oscar Micheaux, like many African-American independent filmmakers, were deeply disturbed, by these race riots that were erupting. And not only that, he was also producing his first feature-length film, Within Our Gates, as a direct response to D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. That is a film that was produced in 1915 that really sanctioned the violence against African-American men.
It sure did. And it set the stage to this day in terms of how people think about black folk.
Yes.
The president at the time, I think it was Roosevelt, I might be mistaken, saw the film, said it was not a just film. He also said, but unfortunately, it's true.
Right, yeah. And it was deeply disturbing to the members of the NAACP. They protested the film. Birth of a Nation was first and foremost a play, before it was a feature-length film. And then it toured. And so, African-American independent filmmakers knew that they not only had to stop the film, many African-American communities were able to stop the film from screening in their communities, but they also knew that they needed to get into the film game themselves to set the record straight about African-American humanity on screen.
Now, The Birth of a Nation depicted blacks as being lazy. There were scenes also lusting after white women, and the Klan came to save them from blacks. That was kind of the storyline for people who don't know about the film Birth of a Nation.
It was, and D.W. Griffith is also, often praised for his innovation in terms of his cinematic techniques. But as far as the storyline and the plot, it did sanction violence against African American families, portray black men as brutes and as savages. In essence, it portrayed gross stereotypes of African Americans, and it also helped to stand as, advocating to increase membership in the Ku Klux Klan. And so African American independent filmmakers decided to write, and tell their own stories about the realities of who really rapes whom.
And that's what we see in this trailer we looked at. The young man, the two young boys in the film. What were they? What is the significance of them in the film with regard, and what was their response to the lynching?
Sure. So the two young boys that you see in the film is first and foremost the young Oscar Micheaux.
Ah, the young Oscar Micheaux.
That is the young Oscar who witnesses a lynching at a very young age.
Okay.
That really propels him to create silent films and race movies of his own to help educate the race about African American humanity. And so African Americans, like Oscar Micheaux, use cinema as a means to uplift the race and to recode and reframe images of black masculinity and black femininity on screen.
And why hasn't Hollywood paid more attention to Oscar Micheaux's work? So many of us have never heard of him. I was one of those folk who had not heard of him. Has his work survived? What happened?
Well, Oscar Micheaux was filmmaking as early as 1918, and his work predates the Harlem Renaissance period. He produced over 40 feature-length films and over 7 novels between 1918 and 1948. At the time that Oscar Micheaux was filmmaking, Charlie Chaplin was on the scene. And Charlie Chaplin really solidified his film image in around 1916 when he was working for S&A Pictures, which was also in Chicago. Now, Charlie Chaplin and several other white filmmakers were chronicled in Moving Picture World, a motion picture magazine to promote the work of filmmakers. But of course, African American filmmakers are excluded from those publications. And so if it wasn't for, African American newspapers and critics that were a part of the Crisis or the Messenger or the Liberator black newspaper or the Chicago Defender, we may never know about Oscar Micheaux's legacy. that he provided for us today.
And what prompted you to do your film about Mr. Micheaux versus maybe a film about something else?
Well, that's certainly a great question.
your love of cinema, for
Right.
one, and you alluded to that earlier. But why him at this time?
Well, I must mention that I first discovered the films of Oscar Micheaux fairly recently myself. I taught for several years in the Black Studies Department at Howard University. And at Howard, I taught a popular Harlem Renaissance movement to the present course, in which I taught students how to trace aesthetic shifts within the literature and the writing of African American poets and novelists from the Harlem Renaissance through the Black arts movement of the 1960s all the way to the present. And I wanted to find African American filmmakers who were also producing during the Harlem Renaissance era, and that's how I discovered the silent films of Oscar Micheaux.
You work with a lot of young people with film.
I do.
What are you teaching them, and what are their responses to learning things that they never knew? Mr. Micheaux, for example, or things like that. What are you teaching the young people, and what do you want them to learn and go away with?
Sure. I teach a African American independent film class at Santa Clara University. I also teach a documentary making for social justice class where I show students how to write, edit, direct.
Cool.
Their own films about local organizations in the communities that are really helping to promote social change. And so in the process, students learn how to chronicle these organizations, and then the organizations are highlighted for their work to serve underrepresented or oppressed communities. I think that it's really important that students learn how to read film and to look at films critically. Bell Hooks has a very important article. It's called The Oppositional Gaze, Black Women and the Oppositional Gaze, and she talks largely about the objectification of Black women and women in general in film, and how we must create an oppositional gaze while we are watching these films. And so it is really important for us to learn how to critique these films and to learn to read the intersections of gender, race, and class, and sexuality in the films that we are watching, and to talk back to these films where we are witnessing stereotypes of, people of color. So basically, I just teach students the important role that African American independent filmmakers played in helping to demystify stereotypes about African Americans.
Sonia Sanchez, who is she and what is she to you? Talk about your books that you've written, and you wrote one with and about her. Talk to us about that.
Sure. So
your books, your writing.
Thank you. So Sonia Sanchez is a poet and activist who was on the scene in the early 1960s with other members of the Black Arts movement and the Black Arts Repertory group that was really inspired by Leroy Jones, now known as Amiri Baraka, who fortunately recently passed away earlier this year. But in their quest to speak truth to the people, African American poets like Sonia Sanchez helped to heighten the consciousness of the race about human rights, about civil rights, about social rights that were needed, for African Americans in this country. They were unafraid, to speak truth to power. And I discovered the work of Sonia Sanchez and other Black poets in a book by Dudley Randall called The Black Poets, where I discovered the works of Langston Hughes, Nikki Giovanni, Carolyn Rogers, Haki Matabuti, at Howard University in the African American Studies Department and in the English department, I learned more about the work of Sonia Sanchez. I met her at the Harlem Book Fair for the first time when I was there promoting my first book. It was called 101 Ways Black Women Can Learn to Love Themselves.
Love the title.
Thank you.
And it's a not only a much needed title, but a much needed message to women. Go ahead.
I actually started writing that book while I was in the Black Studies Department at San Francisco State University. One of the professors, it could have been Oba Tashaka, asked us if we could do anything for our communities, what would it be? And I decided that, we needed a book, that discussed the intersections of gender, race, and class, and sexuality, and a book that empowered Black women to know, their own beauty and the source of their own power,
yes.
To reject their subordination in this country. So getting back to Sonia Sanchez, I met her at the Harlem Book Fair. She came to Howard University and taught a course. It was in that course that she invited me to be her research assistant. And by the end of the year, we had just connected. We had really vibed. Sonia is like a second mother to many younger poets and writers around the country. And she offered me a scholarship at the end of the semester. I actually ended up doing the first dissertation in the United States on Sonia Sanchez's work at Howard University, and it looks at the evolution of her poetry and really tracing the work of African American female poets during the 1960s who helped to revise the Black aesthetic of the time period.
Very pretty.
Signifying Me. Tell us about that book.
Signifying Me was my first attempt at self-publishing a book of poems. I think at the time I was still finding my voice. I was about maybe 25 when
What is it about?
Published. It is just a collection of Black women's writings that speaks from Black women's experiences about growing up Black and female in the inner city. And I speak about the realities of sexism. I speak about being an incest survivor and learning how to reclaim my own voice as a Black woman. And I also speak about the important role that other mothers and other women have played in my psycho and social development. And it is expressed through poetry, through the written form.
Your first feature script, The Postwoman. What is that about? That was your first screenplay?
It was my first screenplay.
And what is that about? I love the title, The Postwoman.
Yeah, The Postwoman is a narrative feature film that seeks to illumine the realities of African American LGBT women in the community. As you know, in mainstream TV and in mainstream culture, usually when we hear the term LGBT, we often identify it with white males. And we rarely hear the realities of people of color who also face complex realities when they are coming out to their children and to their families. I really wanted to write a screenplay that addressed, the marginalization of African American families who are LGBT, who are parenting, and who are raising healthy children. When I went to Howard University for the first time, I became exposed to families who were different than mine. And these were my peers who were being raised by same-sex households or two-parented households. And for me, it was very enlightening to see healthy African-American families who were parenting children. As you know, the American Psychological Association, together with the National Institutes of Health, have all stated that African American LGBT families are able to parent and to raise healthy children. So really, I just wanted to demystify stereotypes about African American families that are doing wonderful things in their communities.
What connection does the Caribbean and its history have for you?
On my life, or
In any way.
can you? I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you
You
said.
did some work around the Caribbean culture, some writings. So what is the connection between the Caribbean? How did you become interested in that culture as it relates to Black Americans here in the United States? What was it for you that brought the Caribbean into your space to work with?
Sure. Well, I've always been interested in the diaspora, and that includes not only the work of Caribbean writers abroad, but also those in Africa, those in Cuba. At Howard University, I did study African American and Caribbean literature, where I became introduced to major themes or tropes that we might see in the literature of Caribbean writers, and that includes, marginalization, cultural contact, the problems of assimilation, that we see when cultures collide, or, when people may migrate to other countries and, they may suffer double consciousness as a result. And so, studying the work of Caribbean writers and the work of other writers across the diaspora has really just enriched, my own writing, and really helped me to see the connections with, some of the realities that we face as people of color in this country as well.
Tell us, what is the state of Black studies in colleges at this time? Are people learning? Are there more courses, less courses? Where are we?
We do know that Black Studies was, the program. Not only was it a program, but it was a movement to demand that, Black Studies be taught in American classrooms and that the curriculum be included, in the course curriculum. Black Studies as a movement also helped to ensure that African American faculty were employed, that students were able to be taught by professors who looked like them, who shared their cultural experiences. I'm sorry, there's a little who shared their cultural experiences. And, as a movement, it helped to open doors for other movements around the world. So the women's movement largely was inspired by the Black Studies movement, the Chicana movement, and other movements across the United States. Also, Black Studies helped to ensure that African American writers, philosophers, scholars, and thinkers were included in critical anthologies. Many canons, when we think of the literary canon, it only included, at that time period, the work of, European thinkers and writers. And so Black Studies really helped to, ensure that a discipline, was available for students to study, and for the world to really understand the African American experience in America.
How different are your messages to girls and women versus boys and men, or are your teaching curves the same in terms of what you want them to understand about social justice and personal justice?
To students as general, or did you mean to African American students?
African American students.
I generally teach both African American men and women the history of the African American experience in America. And, really what I want them to learn is our role in liberation struggle. I want them to learn the important role that liberation plays, in our legacy, our legacy of struggle and our culture of resistance.
And what is the attendance with regard to other folk, Anglo-Saxons, Latinos, and Black Studies wanting to learn and know in your classes? What do you see? Do you see them being interested in learning more about us?
I do. I think it's fascinating when students want to learn about the African American experience, that they didn't get in high school. you know, and sometimes it's not until college where they actually get to take an African American history course and learn the truth about African American social movements that have impacted the world, African American writers and critical thinkers and filmmakers who were on the scene, you know, at the same time that D.W. Griffith or Charlie Chaplin was. And so it's really important for students, you know, to learn about American history. And as we know, African American history is American history. And so to teach them about, you know, African American artists, scholars, and critical thinkers is it's a wonderful opportunity, and the students, you know, they're so blessed, you know, by the end of the course to really become enriched
and enlightened, sure,
sure. Yeah, about the experience, and it's good for them as human beings too.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And when you're not teaching and when you're not serious and you're just playing around,
right.
What do you do? I understand you like to golf. And what else do you do?
I am. I spend a lot of time reading and writing, but I do.
Is that relaxing for you?
It is relaxing
is it?
For me.
Sure.
Yeah, my mind is always churning, so I have to, you know, stay within the books or, you know, stay writing. Just because I have so many deadlines, they seem to be never ending. There's so many things that I want to do, so many other films that I want to finish.
Well, what's next?
I'm also co-writing a feature film about the bombing of Black Wall Street in 1921 with a writer. His name is Funk Face, and that film is in early development. I'm also writing a critical anthology about Sonia Sanchez, Maya Angelou, who recently passed away. It's such an unfortunate loss. Wrote the foreword to the anthology. It's a critical anthology that looks at the evolution of Sonia Sanchez's poetry and plays. There's also a book that I'm writing about Oscar Micheaux. It looks at his leading women. A lot of people don't realize that Oscar Micheaux's films, you know, they primarily feature African American women in the title role. And so, you know, it was very empowering for him to help to demystify stereotypes. Yes. But at the same time, you know, you can look at the complexity of Oscar Micheaux, too, because while he, you know, wrote and directed films about the problems of passing, the problems of lynching, you know, he tended to lean towards using, you know, light-skinned actresses in his films. So in his attempt to discuss the problems of colorism or the sickness of colorism or the sickness of passing, you know, he kind of leaned towards those same stereotypes. But you can see the evolution even in his own cinema. Like any filmmaker, artist, or writer, Oscar Micheaux evolved. And, you know, we see so many themes and subjects within his films, like lynching, you know, the problems of passing.
Yes.
Problems of the black bourgeoisie, hypocrisy.
Well, if I didn't say it, I love the idea of having you, this black woman, doing the story about this black man. We black men love having you, our sisters, our mothers, our daughters, to acknowledge us, to praise us, to tell people about how good we are, the things that we're doing. So part of doing this interview with you is why I wanted to do it, because I wanted you to know that is what attracted me. When I saw the article in Bayview, and I thought, this sister is, you know, I need to talk to her. So I really enjoyed that. You're going to have the last word or poem or both. Can you leave us with a poem, please?
Johnny, I just want to thank you for having me on your show. You know, it's been a blessing to discuss, you know, the work of Oscar Micheaux.
You're welcome.
And the work that I have been doing as a young African-American writer. I did want to leave a mention about the websites where you can find more information about the feature film, the biopic on Oscar Micheaux. You can find out more information. It will be co-produced by Monica R. Cooper and Preston L. Holmes. They did Malcolm X in 1992. And that website is www.oscarmicheauxmovie.com. You can find out more information about The Postwoman, a narrative feature film, That's at www.thepostwomanmovie.com. And if you can't remember any of this, you can just go onto my website, which is jamiewalker.org. You got to put in ORG.
Yeah, well, we have all that information on the screen.
Oh,
but
good.
we're also, when we post this broadcast on our internationalmediatv.com website, we're also going to have those links that you just alluded to, so that people can go and find all of the people you want to find.
Check us out.
Absolutely. Last word?
Sure.
Can I squeeze a poem out of you?
I don't have a poem in me.
Whatever you want.
But I do. There's several poems and narratives that are running through me all the time. I can't think of one to leave you with right now. But what I can leave you with is to just to help to ensure that we understand the role of Oscar Micheaux and what role he plays in American cinema and world cinema today. And that is really helping to uplift the race and to help demystify stereotypes of African Americans on screen. And so I'm just blessed to be here today to share more information about his life and his legacy on Johnnie Burrell's station. Thank you.